Good morning. Welcome to the very first virtual actuator training hosted by the Blythe Company. As most of you know, I'm Perry Blythe. I've been working with Piedmont for quite a number of years. We won't go into that any further. I also like to introduce Adam Shoemake. Adam is our VP of Operations, but more importantly, he is my #1 backup for Piedmont Natural Gas. If there is ever a situation where you can't get a hold of me, please feel free to get hold of Adam, and in the future you may find you want to contact him first. Thank you and welcome to this training. This is a fail open or fail closed actuator. It has a pressure cylinder on this end and a spring encased in a chamber. Again, this is for what's termed fail safe operation, either fail open or fail closed. Hopefully you can see the monitor here showing in red closed position as we move through the operation of this. In most cases, the air supply system, and we'll go over this with each actuator, but the air supply system is pretty much the same for every actuator we deal with in the pneumatic ranges. That's this one, the fail last position, and actually in the OPP would be different. This is your inlet filter. This is where the tubing that's coming from the supply point on your pipe. This is an inlet filter. It is a particulate only filter. Probably somewhere around 10 to 100 micron, but sufficient to keep particulate. Out of the high pressure regulator, the first and the only cut that we do, this will take up to full pipeline pressure and reduce it to the approximate 100 psi that we operate these actuators at. From that reduction, we then go to a coalescing filter. This is a low pressure, so this has a maximum inlet of 250 psi, but well below or well above the pressure that we are typically operating these units at. This also, from the first point regulation, has a pressure gauge so that you're able to tell how much pressure is going to the actuator. It also has a relief valve in the event that this regulator ever fails, that you're not sending high pressure gas to a low pressure pneumatic actuator. At that point is where some of it changes. This again is pretty much the same on whatever actuator we deal with, but then once we get to the solenoid, it will change. This being a 3-way solenoid for this particular type of actuator, and then you also have a manual override. All the solenoids that we supply will have a manual override of some type. This is your coil connection. This is where you supply the 24 volts in most cases to activate the spool within the solenoid, which then allows inlet pressure to go to the cylinder, which pulls the piston and turns the actuator. So at this point, I'm going to attach air to this point, and as you notice, this is being in a failed position. We have not activated any signal to this at this point, but we're able to pull, and hopefully you're able to see the monitor changing position to the open position. Now, you can take a padlock. I'm going to release that. You can put a padlock so that when this is energized or the manual override is enacted, you can put a padlock in here to keep it in that position. It is still not the position that I would recommend that you use for a situation where you want 100% guarantee that the valve will never come open unless you want it to. Again, you can see that we're moving from open to closed in the closed. This is a fail closed operation. We will shortly activate this to show you how that works. Now that we've shown you how the manual override on this particular solenoid, we're going to activate the 12-volt coil. So Adam, if you'll put us power to it. You notice this pops back, giving you an indication. You also will see that the monitor is turning, and we have exhaust coming out of the cylinder where the piston is being pushed back this way with the spring. So the valve is now in an open position, and as long as 12 volts are maintained, or 24 volts in your case, are maintained on the coil, then the unit will stay in the open position. Once it's removed, the valve goes back to the closed position. Certainly, it's should have mentioned earlier, this will be a chat session, so if you have questions as we move forward, please chat those to us. We'll be monitoring those and answering the questions in regards to each one of these as we move through them. Okay, now we're over on the opposite side of the actuator, and we are at the manual override. This is the override that I would suggest that you use in the event that you want to make sure that this valve, if you take it to the open position, that it would never go closed, is done by the hydraulic override. One of the things that I want to point out, this actuator has not ever been installed. You will notice a 1/4-inch plug in the top of this cylinder. This is the hydraulic, where the hydraulic fluid is contained. This, upon arrival, you will also find to the left side a package which is taped to the tubing. This package contains the vent required for the hydraulics to breathe. Hydraulics have to have the ability to breathe for them to work properly, and so the package is to be removed, and once it sits there for a while, tape gets sticky. But what you do is then you remove this 1/4-inch plug. I would always check my hydraulic fluid to make sure that for some reason it had not been drained out or gotten removed. But at that point, once we get the packaging open, we will install the vent. This is the vent that you receive, and at that point, this, and you can put a round of Teflon tape on it if you want to. It's not required because this, again, is not a pressure containing point. But once you're finished, that's the way that this unit should look. It should have a breather on the unit. This being a fail closed again actuator, your selector knob and instructions are listed here for the manual override on all units that go out. But what you'll notice is that in the center position, the solenoid is doing all the work. The manual override is not being utilized in any way, shape, or form. In the event that you need to use a manual override, in this case, you would come over, you would rotate this knob to the position of operating the hydraulics. This one does have, of course, lockouts available for all three positions, but this is a dead position, the one all the way to this side. You say, well, how do I know that that's a dead position? This is the manual handle for that. And what you would find when the handle is over in this direction is this will not move at all. The handle will not move downward in any way. Don't try to force it. I do have some people that even clip that tab part off. The factory leaves it because it's a uniform for all varieties. But when you go to the proper side, you'll notice now this will begin, and it's not simple, but watch the monitor, and as you begin to pump the hydraulic fluid, we are now going from the closed position, compressing the spring, to the open position. Once you got it all the way to the open position, as long as this stays here in this position, the hydraulics are not allowed to move it back by way of removing air pressure. The hydraulics are now doing the work required to open this actuator in this particular situation. Once you're done, this has a nice little point of which you can have it on the side of the cylinder for use. But you have completed what you need to do. You do not have to pump this actuator in the opposite direction. You simply rotate the tab back, and you notice that the spring has now pushed all the hydraulics back into the cylinder and closed the valve again. If you needed it to go the other direction, you still just flip it back to that point, and you can lock it into any position. And you'll notice that the handle will go straight down. There's no pressure on this at this time. Okay, we're now going to talk about the switch neck mechanism that we've removed the top of the monitor from the housing. Here's your terminal switch or terminal strip and the switches. The bottom switch is simply moved by lifting up, rotating, and dropping. You align it to where the arrow is with the gold tab. This switch is now made with contact back to the rock to give an indication of closed. And we're now going to check the open switch. Adam, if you'll operate. You'll notice that the switches are rotating. Once we have gotten to where we know that the switches are to the proper point, or the actuator is moved to 90 degrees, we move this one down and bring it back up to the point. All right, Adam, let her go. Notice this switch comes back saying I am closed. I've made this switch. This is in the closed position because the actuator has exhausted the spring. Let's open one more time. Fully compressed. This is in line with that switch. Now, some of you may look at this and go, well, why are those not 90 degrees apart? It's so that, strictly due to the location of the switches. The unit is making a 90-degree turn, but because of the locations of the switches, they are not 90 degrees opposing. You can release it. As far as wiring, you'll notice that there is a solenoid indication here on the terminal strip. Solenoids, the coils of solenoids do not care which one of these are which, as long as the opposite side, they do not care. This, of course, is your ground that would hook to the ground screw that you have here, and then your switches are on the other side. You'll notice that this switch, this terminal strip, is elevated. This makes it very simple for you to get the wire in and where versus if it were flat. You'll also notice that on the inside of the cover, there is a wiring diagram that shows you exactly what we just discussed. You have now completed the setup. This one is done. Okay, we're going to answer one question that came up in yesterday's session. It's how do I determine whether a fail-safe actuator, one that has a spring cartridge, is fail open or fail closed? Certainly you have a monitor on top that's indicating, but if you look at the actuator from the stop side, these are the stops that are shown here. If the spring cartridge is on the right side, that is a fail closed actuator. If the spring cartridge was reversed and was on the left side, that would be a fail open actuator. One thing in regards to the stops, setting the stops on these once the valve actuator has been put in place, you can make minor adjustments with these. Keep in mind that you have a spring force pushing against the stop. You may have to put some air to start the actuator so that it comes off of this stop or the other stop to make minor adjustments. Always make those adjustments in minor increments. They should be very close to where they should be. So 1/8 of a turn, 1/16 of a turn, 1/4 of a turn is a lot. Make them in small adjustments to get to where you're on the closed seat, starting from the open side.